Rupe Janavalabha Idivadadari Jasudanana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramhansa Bhagavataḥ Ashtatarasi Sri Maharaj aṅge Sri Bhakti-yogīs Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramhansa Bhagavataḥ Ashtatarasi Sri Maharaj aṅge Sri Bhakti-yogīs Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shivati Giradhar Shiva Sri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Dai Gaura Vimanandi. All glories to the sum of devotees. All glories to the sum of devotees. All glories to the sum of devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasahivadare. Srimati Bhakti-vedanta Swami Nityanamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vacharani Vishesha Srinivadi Pastacharya Satarani. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam To Jayamudiraye Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavati Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Oh, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 20? Okay. This is third canto, chapter 28, entitled Kapila's Instructions on Devotional Service, text number 20. Tasmil labdha-padam cittaṁ sarvāvayava saṁsthitam vilakṣyaikatra saṁyujyād aṅge bhagavato Muni tasmil labdha-padam cittam sarvāvayava-saṁsthitam vilakṣyaikatra saṁyujyād aṅge bhagavato munih tasmil labdha-padam cittam sarvāvayava-saṁsthitam vilakṣyaikatra saṁyujyād aṅge bhagavato munih tasmil labdha-padam cittam sarvāvayava-saṁsthitam vilakṣyaikatra saṁyujyād aṅge bhagavato muniḥ Ladies. Tasmin, on the form of the Lord. Labdha-padam, fixed. Cittam, the mind. Sarva, all. Avayava, limbs. Saṁsthitam, fixed upon. Vilakṣya, having distinguished. Ekatra, in one place. Saṁyujyāt, should fix the mind. Aṅge, on each limb. Bhagavataḥ, of the Lord. Muni, the sage. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, the Bhakti-yogīs Prabhu. Translation: in fixing his mind on the eternal form of the Lord, the yogi should not take a collective view of all his limbs, but should fix the mind on each individual limb of the Lord. Please repeat. In fixing his mind on the eternal form of the Lord, the yogi should not take a collective view of all his limbs, but should fix the mind on each individual limb of the Lord. Purport. The word Muni is very significant. Muni means one who is very expert in mental speculation, or in thinking, feeling, and willing. He is not mentioned here as a devotee or yogi. Those who try to meditate on the form of the Lord are called munis, or less intelligent, whereas those who render actual service to the Lord are called bhakti-yogīs. The thought process described below is for the education of a muni. In order to convince the yogi that the absolute truth or the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never impersonal at any time, the following verses prescribe observing the Lord in His personal form, limb after limb. To think of the Lord as a whole may sometimes be impersonal. Therefore, it is recommended here that one first think of his lotus feet, then his ankles, then the thighs, then the waist, then the chest, then the neck, then the face, and so on. One should begin from the lotus feet and gradually rise to the upper limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord. Om Ajnanitamidam Dasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Munitam Dena Tasmil Umuro Divachalam Pangam Langai Devinamyaki Damani Sigurum Digitan Pramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Srila Prabhupada comments that the study of the Bhagavatam is similar, that it is a gradual progression of meditation, right? The first parts of the Bhagavatam, you're beginning at his lotus feet, and then you're ending with the 10th canto, and one finally meditates upon the beautiful face of the personality of Godhead. So we're right in the middle. We're learning how to meditate on the Lord's lotus feet and his ankles and his calves. Gradually we're going to go up to the knees and thighs. So this meditation, as Prabhupada points out here, is meant for those who are more materialistic. Not quite fully developed in their understanding of the absolute truth. Pantastu koti satavatsara sambragamyo vayoratapi munaso muni pungavanam. Lord Brahma also points out that the yogis, as Prabhupada is clarifying here in the purport, the yogis and also the jnanis, they're engaged in their respective practices. But it's described that only the tip of the toe of the personality of Godhead is achieved by their pranayam practices, by their speculation, and that even that is rarely achieved, only after prolonged use. It's not like I was listening to a very nice tape, Srila Prabhupada was describing how not that one go through his day 23 hours and 45 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes you're meditating on something. And what is this meditation, Prabhupada was asking? And no one could answer. He was asking the devotees, so can you say what this meditation is on, this transcendental meditation? He said, no one, of course, would dare answer because there's no clear understanding unless one takes up the path of bhakti. But the yogis, they can meditate for so many years, and the jnanis, they can engage in their mental speculation. Nayam atma pravachanena labhyo namereya bahuna shrutena. The absolute truth is not understood by unlimited speculations and arguments, because that's all it is. Prabhupada points out in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a purport where he talks about the munis, and that one is not considered a muni unless he has a differing opinion. Otherwise, you're nobody. You have to establish yourself with some other thought, other opinion, and more often than not, contradictory. So that sort of endeavor is there's no benefit, there's no fruit. And Prahlad Maharaj, he uses more stark words in where he says, Matirne Krishne Paratak Svato Va, Mito Vibhagya Griha Vratanam, Punak Punas Charvita Charvananam, the last verse, or the line of that verse, that is simply chewing the chewed. What they're doing is taking the same subject and trying to extrapolate from it another separate meaning, trying to create some kind of alternative thought. And that sort of speculation, it goes nowhere. Because of their uncontrolled senses, they're engaged in that kind of study, that kind of practice. And there's no benefit. They're simply chewing the chewed. It's just like if you, I don't know if anyone here, I'm sure they may have some experience. I remember going through the early years of schooling, that sometimes you would go into the classroom and you would feel under the desk little lumps of something. We know what it is. And you can't imagine trying to scrape that off and chew it again. It's revolting. It's nauseating. But that is the same attempt by such jnanis, by such yogis, that they're taking that which has already been chewed and done over so many different times in so many different ways, and still they try to get some taste out of it, some flavor out of it. But there's nothing there. It's empty. That kind of practice is useless. It's simply a, what is it? Shrama evike. It's a waste of time. People are engaged in so many activities in the world nowadays that there's no benefit to it. It's simply a waste of time. They're still controlled by their, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, vitaraga bhaya krodha stitya dhira munir uchate. They're still controlled by their anger and lust, anger, and greed. They're still disturbed by that. And we have evidence of that in the Bhagavatam, where great yogis, powerful personalities who were very accomplished in their mystic practices, would be disturbed at the slightest provocation. And not to pick on Durvas Muni, but he had quite a anger streak in him. Or Vishwamitra or Sabra Muni. These great sages and yogis who were certainly qualified in the mundane world, but when it comes to becoming transcendental to the modes of material nature, there's still attachment, fear, and anger there. And Krishna, on the other hand, explains that one is called a sage who is of steady mind, cittaḍhira. This word is also thrown around in a yoga practice, to be sthita, cittaḍhira. When you practice these certain asanas, as one progresses in the practice, you're meant to go into the asana in a very sequential way, and when you perfect that sequence, then you can stay in that asana a longer time, and you derive more benefit from it. So again, the understanding is there, but how to apply it, that we have to understand is the difference between the munis, as Prabhupada is pointing out here, and the bhakti-yogīs. This muni is very significant. It means one who's very expert in mental speculation or in thinking, right? They're very happy and very accomplished at concocting or creating different ideas. But the bhakti yogi, instead of being attached or averted or angered, is engaged in the process of bhakti, as Prabhupada points out here, that instead of attachment and anger and aversion, one is active and daring. Instead of being attached or averted, one is active and daring. And instead of being angry, one is not attached to the success or failure, but instead is fixed in determination. So this is achievable by one who's accomplished in the practice of bhakti yoga. It's one who is of steady mind and who's exhausted all his business of creative speculation. This is the difference between the practice of Krishna consciousness and the process of bhakti as compared to other processes who may provide you some sort of a mental satisfaction or a temporary enjoyment, but in the ultimate sense, there's no true benefit there. Those who try to meditate on the form of the Lord are called munis, or less intelligent, whereas those who render actual service to the Lord are called bhakti-yogīs. So the meditation on the different limbs of the Lord, or on the complete form of the Lord, as Prabhupada points out here, is very interesting, how it can sometimes lead to impersonalism. I would ask, does anyone have any specific comment on that? It's a very interesting statement Prabhupada points out here. How is it that observing the Lord or looking at the complete form of the Lord can lead to impersonalism? Any comments? Speculations? Bhakti Prabhu. You know, it's just like when we're looking at the deity. When you look at the deity and you just glance at him and you try to observe his whole form, there's an appreciation there, but there's not a clear, detailed understanding. There's not a clear appreciation of how his limbs are in such a beautiful way, how his dress is in such a beautiful way, how his eyes are in such a beautiful shape, how his form is shaped in such a beautiful, attractive way. So I can see that happening, that as soon as you look upon the altar and you see, oh, there's some deity forms, there's some they're made of this or that, and there's not a clear appreciation of the beauty. That would be my Yeah, familiarity breeds contempt. So, therefore, it's recommended, and you can see that sometimes it may become just rather impersonalism. Oh, okay, well, it's just a person, and not a full appreciation of who that personality is and their qualities. So, instead, Prabhupada is pointing out here that to think of the Lord as a whole may sometimes be impersonal. Therefore, it is recommended that one should first think of his lotus feet. And considering his lotus feet, how beautiful they are, and what is the benefit of taking shelter of those lotus feet. There's a lot of detail that when you read the Nectar of Devotion, for instance, or the writings of the Goswamis, their detailed appreciations of the transcendental form of the Lord is on such a complete transcendental plane. And to see it just as a form is not fully appreciating it. And it may even become mundane. There's a danger of that. Bhishmadev writes he states in the Mahabharata in his instructions that anything which is transcendental to the material nature is inconceivable. Anything which we understand as transcendental to material nature is inconceivable. Whereas arguments are all mundane. Therefore, you cannot understand the transcendental with mundane argument, with argument. There can't be this opinion or that opinion. It has to be absolute. The absolute truth is transcendental. He's not understood. Krishna says again in Bhagavato, then we have to understand what is transcendental, what establishes something as transcendental. And that we can understand from Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord himself points out how or what is transcendental, is to be above the modes of material nature, right? Trivya Gunamaya Bhavaya. It's to be above the modes of material nature. That's established as transcendental. So mundane arguments cannot understand the transcendental. And until one fully understands the form of the Lord, there's a danger of it becoming very mundane. And as Prabhupada points out here, therefore it is recommended here that one first think of his lotus feet, then his ankles, then his thighs, then the waist, then the chest, the neck, the face, and so on. One should begin from the lotus feet and gradually rise to the upper limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord. And that's what the Bhagavatam is helping us to do, by gradually revealing the transcendental position and form of the Lord. And otherwise, there's every danger of missing the mark. And as Lord Brahma again states, you can go on like this for ages. For ages. Pantastu koti satavatsara sambragam vayora tapi monaso muni pungavan. You can travel at the speed of mind, or the wind, and for ages, and you'll never achieve the correct understanding or the goal of it all. So, very interesting explanation Prabhupada gives here. And just some thoughts. Any questions or comments? Cittaṁ Prabhu.
Since you quote those verses of the Brahma Samhita, that pantastu koti satavatsara sampragamyo, and it is mentioned there that after many years, the yogis and the jnanis, they only achieve the tip of the toes.
Tip of the toe.
Okay? So then, right. So then another verse came in my mind from Brahma Samhita. Angani yasya sakalendriya vritti manti pasyanti panti. So in that verse it is mentioned that each one of the limbs of the body of the Lord are equally, they function equally, meaning like they have absolute power. So then, now my question will be, how is it then that it appears like it's a put down, like, oh, you only saw the tips of the toe of the Lord. You didn't get to see the whole thing. You know what I'm going to? So then I thought, what's wrong with seeing the lotus feet of the Lord? Even if it took them many years, still, from the other verse, we're seeing that the Lord, in the absolute sense, he can actually, yeah, great. You guys got it. You did it. Bravo. But it's not. It's like, you know. So then, yeah, so.
We can appreciate that work. We can appreciate that hard labor, that the jnanis and yogis, but still, they're missing something. They're missing the full form of the Lord, and that comes by the process of bhakti. Mm-hmm. There's not a full appreciation. That would be my answer. Certainly, there's benefit, eternal benefit, lasting benefit. You don't lose it, but there's. I believe Krishna explains through great detail in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna how this personal form of him, yoginam api sarva, the highest yogi is one who understands the personal form. I think Archita had a comment.
See, just before we go to that one, then another thought came to my mind that sometimes how we present the different levels of Krishna consciousness or realizations to the point, for example, that someone will say, oh, you just made it to the Vaikunthas, but you didn't get to see actually the real thing, Goloka Vrindavan. You know the equation that I'm making? It's almost like it's not that much as the other, as the place of Goloka Vrindavan.
Well, even in the spiritual world, there's gradation. Even in the spiritual realm, there's different gradation, but it's absolute. We still understand that it's absolute, whether it's Krishna in Vaikuntha or whether it's Krishna in a different mood in a Goloka, it's still absolute. It's still transcendental. It's not that because you're in Vaikuntha, you're a lesser, or that you don't feel satisfied, or that you're teetering on, or you're on thin ice or something. No, it's absolute. Krishna's there in the Vaikuntha. He's also there in Goloka, and he's also there in Mayapur-dham, and it was different forms. But it's still transcendental. Archita?
Hi, well, it comes down to the mood of the practitioner. We know that those who practice the Ashtanga Yoga, they meditate on the Lord in the heart, and sometimes they think that that's them. Whereas the devotee, like Dhruva, he was meditating on the Lord in the heart. He saw the Lord in the heart, but because he is a devotee, the Lord appeared externally, and he worshipped him. He didn't think that this is me. When he saw the Lord in the heart, he wasn't thinking this is me, which some of the Ashtanga Yogis do. So it's the mood of the practitioner. When Krishna came 5,000 years ago, many people saw him in person. They saw the whole form. It's not that they were only seeing his feet or his arms, or they saw everything, but some of them tried to kill that form because their mood is wrong. So the end result is based on the mood of the person involved. If you in your heart are still envious of God, then when you get to see him in person, you may still want to try to kill him, like Shishapal and all these others. So it comes down to your mood. And the mood is set by your experience of meeting a devotee. That's what a devotee can do for everybody, is transfer the material mood into divine spiritual mood.
Thank you. Rabindranath, I think, had his hand raised for a good while.
Yeah, thank you for a wonderful class, Mike. You know, I always thought in the beginning of Krishna consciousness that it's synonymous, the lotus feet of Krishna, with service to Krishna. In other words, in the beginning when I remember when I joined, they would always tell me that the lotus feet of the Lord is like service to Krishna. And then from that service, then you begin to go higher and higher and higher in understanding the form of the Lord. So even for devotees, it's very important to start at the lotus feet with devotional service, and as we increase that service, then we become more and more ecstatic. And I noticed that even when you're meditating on the deity, it's like if you refuse to look at the face immediately, you just look at the lotus feet, then you do look at the ankles, and then you look at the thigh and the waist and the chest and then the neck. By the time you get to the face of the Lord, you're ecstatic. It's actually beautiful.
Yeah.
You'll see the smile on Krishna's face. So anyway, I just thought I'd kind of say that because that's what I experienced when I was a new devotee.
Yeah, it's a personal experience.
Yes.
It's a personal experience. Krishna consciousness is a personal experience. We're not there's no space for speculating. If you simply take what Krishna is offering, take what the spiritual master is giving, there's complete satisfaction there. Rabindranath Prabhu?
Now you mentioned how by mundane argument one can't understand the transcendence. Is there something like spiritual argument where one can understand the transcendence?
Well, of course, even in amongst liberated souls, they have different discussion. Yeah, but the ultimate, the bottom line, is that Krishna is the absolute, and that bhakti is the process to attain him. But still there can be discussion in how to apply it, how to apply that bhakti, how to execute it. But there's no argument that bhakti is the topmost practice and tool to use to understand him.
Vada, Vitanda, and Jalpa. And there are, three different types of verbal interactions. So in the Vada one, you're discussing with somebody, you can call it an argument, but it's for the purpose of enhancing your mutual understanding. So that's recommended. So in response to Rabindranath's question, there is spiritual argument. It's like when two devotees get together, that's that verse in the Bhagavad Gita, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me, their lives are surrendered unto me, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss, enlightening one another and conversing, discussing, arguing, whatever.
The argument is a little too, I think it's a real...
connotation is...
it has a bad connotation to it. There can be debate and discussion, like you said, but argument, we don't see that in spiritual circles, actually. They may have some debate in how to serve God, how to engage in his service, how to realize him. Yeah, we can debate on...
It's not adversarial, it's not like...
It's not adversarial.
That element is not there. But sometimes I've heard it's like when they have a jagya, the Brahmins will argue. You've heard that? Prabhupada used that word. They'll argue about the conclusions to the Vedas. So, it can be used for spiritual upliftment.
The argument, it has that mundane or material element to it that...
you want to win.
Yeah.
Well, that's Vitanda. There's Vada, and the Vitanda is when you're engaging with the person and really all you're interested in is just winning, defeating the other person. So that's, not what we're looking at.
Yeah, we're not here to do that. We're accepting what is being given by the bona fide authority. right, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.